we'll let you take it away.
All right. So my name is Mike Thornton. I work with Latimer County Emergency Management, and I'm a disaster preparedness educator. So basically what I do is I work with Mezzo Safety, which is my severe weather preparedness company, which goes out to facilities. The way I used to do it is I used to live in Southwest Oklahoma. So I actually did a lot of severe weather preparedness outreach with children as well as adults. Normally children are more fun to work with just because they're younger. They take in everything you say and you can just be a little bit more interesting with them. So that's what I do. And I'm not sure.
And then you just press the front key on it.
So here's my background. I was born in southern Wisconsin, as I stated earlier. Stoughton, Wisconsin, which is about 30 minutes from Madison. And I experienced an F3 tornado in 2005, and we'll talk about that. But just to go into a little bit, that was the Stoughton, Wisconsin F3 tornado. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that before, but that was a very damaging tornado. It caused $40 million in damage. And it was very bad. When I was 8 years old when that tornado happened, and I remember it very vividly. So, but we'll go into more discussion on that. In 2016, I moved to Oklahoma and began majoring in emergency management in 2019 under Jackie Wright, which is the former Oklahoma Emergency Management State Coordinator for the Northwest region. And he turned to professor at Rose State College. I'm very thankful for his leadership because it has allowed me to get to where I am in life now. Currently, I am the Deputy Director for Latimer County Emergency Management. So my position deals with public outreach, like I'm doing right now. It also deals with severe weather operations, which we will talk about for sure. Then I have to fill out grants, and then I perform the duties of the director pretty much whenever he's gone. So that is a little bit about me. Now let's talk about this 2005 Wisconsin tornado outbreak. So obviously here is the F3 tornado that struck Stoughton, Wisconsin. This was actually the highest or most intense tornado of the day. 27 other tornadoes struck the state of Wisconsin. This is also the biggest tornado outbreak to ever hit Wisconsin. The last one was in 1988, where we saw 24 tornadoes. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because instead we're going to talk about the Stoughton tornado. Now, if you guys have ever searched the Stoughton tornado, this is the first image that comes up. That image, when you're looking at it, you might be thinking it's actually in town, but in fact, it's actually a quarter mile from the town. But right now, this is debris from the Greenbrier Estates, which was an estate about a mile outside of Stoughton, Wisconsin. And it was filled with $1 million homes. And those $1 million homes got wiped off the planet by it. As you can see here, it caused $43 million in damage. It injured one person and killed one. Now that one person has affected my life in the most positive way. It's kind of a messed up way to say it, but basically out of this tragedy, a passion was born, and that was for severe weather preparedness. Harold Orlsky, I believe that's how you say his last name, was killed in his home as he was trying to get down into his basement, bricks above his home from his fireplace came down onto him. And ever since that day, I have wondered, literally, I have wondered, how can we get these warnings to be much more of a lead time for the public, right? How can we give a better lead time for the public, is what I was trying to say. So as a result of that death, a passion was born. And in 2008, I started watching the Weather Channel, as most kids did back in the 2000s, who was interested in weather. If I have any older people here, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. And I saw Dr. Greg Forbes, and oh my gosh, he blew that passion up into something else. And I started learning a little bit more about meteorology through him, and then I was like, hey, I want to start studying this thing. So I started getting meteorology books and magazines that had to do with weather, and it slowly turned into something I became extremely passionate about. So this tornado is why I'm here today, as well as, unfortunately, this death. So if you ever hear me talk about severe weather preparedness, I will bring up Harold and I'll talk about him as much as I can. Now this tornado, this was May 16, 2017. This is the Elk City tornado. As you can see here, we have high-end EF2 damage. Not exactly sure where that photo was taken, but that is high EF2 damage right there. This tornado, I'm not sure if any of you guys lived here in 2017, but this tornado came from a group of tornadoes that formed actually earlier before this. So basically what we had storms in the Texas Panhandle. One storm, or excuse me, they basically split. And one storm produced the Mclean, Texas tornado, and then this storm came up behind it into southwestern Oklahoma. And when it got outside of Elk City, it was completely rain wrapped, and it produced a violent EF2 tornado that went through the southeast end of town. 75 homes were heavily damaged. We had 10 injuries, 1 death, that being Gene Bo Milkey's, if I remember correctly. That's right there. He left his mobile home for better shelter. That's what I was told. However, for some reason, he went back to his mobile home and unfortunately did not make it out as the tornado steamrolled that mobile home. And as you can imagine, I don't think I have to go into too much further detail on that. So this was about an hour after that tornado occurred. If I can get to play here. Oops. There we go. So this right here, I'll let it play out here. So this is what we call mutual aid, which is important in meteorology because we have all of these different vehicles from all over southwestern Oklahoma responding to this disaster an hour after it occurred. Most of these people are unaware that there may be storms behind that main storm coming in that may impact their their search and rescue operations. So with meteorology, with this, we have to be informed of weather because if we have a second round coming, these people have to be informed so they can take shelter, right? So that's where that meteorology comes into play when we're talking about mutual aid and recovery incidents. If I can get back to,
And then you just hit,
oh, that's it. Whoop. You may have to come in and do that. Sorry about that. You're good. There we go. So again, May 16, 2017 tornado, it was a very damaging EF2 tornado. Unfortunately killed 1 person. Now out of these 2 fatalities, my life completely changed. In 2017, I started speaking with the Midwest Storm Spotters League in Stoughton, Wisconsin. Basically, Josh Schwenkstu, he is the owner of that whole organization. He asked me to come speak to children about severe weather preparedness, and I realized that this was a great opportunity to start kind of working towards things I was passionate about. So since 2017, that was 5 years ago, I've been doing these type of talks. Obviously, I'm not talking about preparedness today, but I've been doing public outreach since then. I switched from Oklahoma City Community College, which I was majoring, or excuse me, not majoring, I was going for my EMTB certificate. And I went to Rope State College and I started majoring in emergency management. And then 2020, I started writing disaster preparedness articles on my website as a safety, which I am so proud of that mission. My articles have been viewed in 6 of the 7 continents. And I've heard so much positive feedback, and I'm just really thankful for that. And then I also became a Weather Ready Nation ambassador. And then in 2021, I graduated EM and became the emergency management director of Latimer County Emergency Management as a result of Matthew. And we'll talk more about networking later. So what is emergency management? I'm not going to read that exact definition because that's FEMA's definition. And while it's correct, emergency management is much more than creating frame networks. It's more so about preparing communities, mitigating loss of life, responding to disasters of any kind, and recovering from those disasters more efficiently. But if you wanted to read it, you can. So as I said, we have 4 different phases: mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, and that's it. And with each one of these phases, we're going to talk about how meteorology affects all 4. So mitigation and meteorology. In emergency management, we have something called a hazard mitigation plan. These hazard mitigation plans are usually backed by a lot of meteorological data that help us see the vulnerabilities that each community may have. This is important because when we find those vulnerabilities, we can start going out for grants that can mitigate those vulnerabilities and better prepare communities. Such as the HMP grant, which is the hazard mitigation grant. And then also in 2021, I worked alongside the Tipton Police Department, which is a small town, and I'm talking less than a square mile. That's how small it is. They came to me with a problem. They said, hey, look, we've been almost hit by an EF4 tornado in 2011. It came within a mile of hitting the town. 2015, they were almost hit by another tornado. In the 1970s, they were hit by a tornado. And they realized that their system was broken. So they came to me. We worked all year long. In October of 2021, I submitted that plan, and that became part of their system. So what I just said, if you realize, meteorology plays a huge, and I mean a huge role in mitigation and emergency management. It is because of meteorology that we're able to find out vulnerable hazards in the community. And then when we find those vulnerable hazards, we can apply for grants, which allow us to mitigate those potential future vulnerabilities. And this is an idea of what a hazard mitigation plan looks like. It's only 1 page. Here on the left side, we have Tillman County, which I kind of worked on. And on the right side, we have Latimer County. These are usually 300 pages. So what you're seeing here isn't everything. These hazard mitigation plans go from dust storms to drought to hail threat, tornado threat, earthquakes, anything you can think of. And all of that is backed by meteorological data from the NCDC. And it's thanks to meteorologists and that research data that we're able to mitigate the loss of life. So preparedness in meteorology. Well, as an emergency manager, I use meteorology during public outreach all the time. And then I also forecast severe weather setups because of my background. So for public outreach, I'm not sure how many of you guys, have you guys ever done any public outreach with meteorology, like to any schools, talking to any schools or anything like that?
Yes.
You have?
That's more of a scan thing, I think. We have 2 meteorology organizations here. We do like more like operational broadcast stuff, getting students prepared in those fields, and the other organization does more outreach things. Like they have something called the Weather Friends, where everyone dresses up as weather themed superheroes and they go to schools and do outreach stuff like that.
All right, so there you go.
Which, Mike, you've been to the weather festival?
Yes, I have
So
seen
you've
them.
probably seen them.
I definitely have. They
And,
are
and SCAN is the student chapter of the American Meteorologists.
okay. Awesome. So again, I use severe weather with my public outreach events. When I'm talking to children, I'll actually tell them how severe weather forms, how those thunderstorms form, and how we get tornadoes. However, I'm not going to be as in depth about it because they're children. So if you, for some reason, if you ever do talk to children, let's say you go to the National Weather Service because that's operational. if I'm correct. You might go talk to a school. Know your, that's what I'm trying to think of. Know the people you're talking to, know the audience. Because you don't want to go to children and start putting, those big meteorological variables and telling them that, because they're not going to have any idea. It doesn't matter how much knowledge they soak up. They're not going to have any idea what you're talking about. So you got to make it usable for the end user. So that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years, and it's been pretty successful. Like I said, I speak to children, adults, and I'm speaking to you guys now. And I'll be honest with you, there's nothing more incredible than talking to somebody about severe weather safety and realizing that they finally get it and that they need to make that change. So if you guys do get, let's say you go to the National Weather Service or you go to a job that has you performing public outreach, just know that what you're teaching them could actually change their attitude towards things. You have to go into it with a lot of passion like I do, and you just have to push for preparedness. And again, know your audience. So I forecast severe weather systems, and this is what I love the most about this. As you guys can see, I do use pivotal weather. That's what I personally use, and I actually use the plus version. And if you'll notice here, I do something similar to what the Storm Prediction Center does, and I will look at severe weather setup 7 days out. Obviously, they look at them 8 days out, but I like to look at them 7 days out because anything beyond that, I really don't take seriously. In the event of a significant severe weather setup, what I will do is I'll start forecasting that setup literally every 6 hours when new data comes out. What I will then do is I will inform my emergency management director, which is Cody Woods. He is the director for Latimer County Emergency Management. And we'll go from there. And if it gets serious enough, we'll start talking to our county commissioners and see if there's any resources we need. And this is a pretty serious part of emergency management because, as you guys know, meteorology can be very serious on severe weather days. So for us, we need to be able to forecast. And how do we get those forecasting abilities? Well, we have to know meteorology. So, and then also I do talk to local NGOs and shelters such as like churches, because we have churches in town. Well, we have a lot of churches in Wilburton, which is where I work. And I'll talk to each one of those churches based on those based on those models. And if those models look significant enough for severe weather, and we're talking like snow, we're not just talking your typical sexy severe weather, spring severe weather. And if there's anything that I see that may be significant, I will talk to those people and kind of let them know that we could have severe weather of any kind, whatever it may be, and that they may need to open their shelter as a warming place or as a shelter for tornadoes. So forecasting is a pretty big thing that I do. And I'm very thankful that I have that background because it allows me to get information out to vulnerable communities. And also, if they are prepared for these events, we could mitigate the loss of life because then they will understand that, hey, we could have severe weather today. We better be paying attention, or we could have severe weather today. We better have our weather radio on because most people keep their weather radios off. So, and now this is probably my most favorite part. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this. This is response to meteorology. So first, we're going to talk about activation of the EOC and monitoring severe weather. Then we're going to talk about how I use Mesonet, Oklahoma Mesonet, and satellite data for fire weather. As well as we're going to talk about weather meters and how we can use those during a gas leak, which is something that has nothing to do with meteorology. But when you use weather meters, that's where you bring that meteorology in. So this is Roger Mills County Emergency Management, EOC. As you guys can see, we have Gibson Ridge level 2 right here. Right here. I'm not sure exactly what that one is, but that's radar first from Oklahoma Mesonet. And then right over here, all the way to the right, that's National Weather Service chat. So what happens when we have a severe weather day? I will usually activate the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center. That's where we do all our severe weather severe weather operations at. And usually I will activate it based on the atmospheric data that is provided by us. And then if the if the Storm Prediction Center issues a tornado watch, severe thunderstorm warning, I will go to the EOC and I'll start monitoring. This is important because once that warning, or excuse me, once that watch is issued, you need to be at the EOC. It doesn't matter because, as we all know, we can get tornadoes out of a severe thunderstorm watch and obviously tornado watch. So it doesn't really matter what watch you're in, you need to be there, just in case. And then this is how, again, using meteorology, every level here is using meteorology. So leading up to the event, I will use models and real-time data, such as what you're seeing here, which is the shear product from mesoanalysis. I will also look at surface-based CAPE, dew points from Mesonet, really anything that can help me be able to determine if today's going to be a significant severe weather event. And what that does is that lets people in the communities that I work in know that we could have a significant severe weather event. I know basically will allow them to get prepared. So once we're in that mode where we have a tornado warning, and this was actually taken, I want to say that was 3 weeks ago when we were actually dealing with a tornado warning in another county. The storm was moving into our county and had tornado warning on it. During severe weather operations, I will actually monitor the severe weather event using Gibson Ridge level 3. That's what I prefer. And then I coordinate with spotters, who usually are our fire departments in the county. So in this case, we had Buffalo Valley, and they were down by the Yanish area overlooking a lake, giving us information on what that storm was doing. Which is important because this storm was headed right into Yanish, which is about right there. And they're the first line of sight basically for us. Thankfully that night they didn't see anything, which is great to know. But you know, that's another important factor. So during severe weather events, again, we are monitoring these events at the EOC, but we're not just doing that. We're talking to the National Weather Service, which is what this last image here to the lower left is. This is me actually sending a message out to the National Weather Service in Tulsa saying, hey, we have damage. I need to know your email so I can send you that damage information. And that is because if we have the damage significant enough, I'm not going to put in National Weather Service chat because there are other media outlets who are in that chat, and we don't always want that information. So I love NWS chat. If anybody has an account, you'll usually see me in TSA and OUN just stalking them. Doesn't matter if it's severe weather day or not. This is also a great tool for emergency managers because, again, it allows us to talk to National Weather Service forecasters. So if we just have a question, it's not just for severe weather. If we have a question about anything, we can directly go to them and talk to them. And it's a great tool that we have. And hopefully this will actually get updated to something new soon. I know the National Weather Service is working on that. So another thing, I know Matt will love this. We use visible satellite as well as Mesonet products such as humidity levels, dew point levels, winds, and so forth to detect wildfires. In Larimer County, one of our issues during the spring months is kind of wildfires because, again, as we have that drier, the drier air and the winds, obviously in the warm temperatures, we get wildfires. So what we use visible satellite data. This is 3.9 microcron. I'm not sure if you guys ever used it, but basically what it does is it shows us wildfires. So there's one to the county to the north of Oklahoma County, one right there, one right there, one right there, and one right there. And what this allows us to do is allows us to know that there's a wildfire currently ongoing, which means that we can respond to that event. And if we need to put out resources such as the forestry services or multiple fire department agencies, we can. And then, of course, like I said, we use Mesonet data, which I absolutely love. I mean, I'm wearing OK First right now. I'm so grateful for those guys. I'm sure you guys obviously know who they are. So, yes, sir.
So what exactly are we looking at here? Would those be smoke plumes detected on infrared setting?
These are actual wildfires. So these are hotspots.
Okay.
So basically what happens is this is a satellite image you're looking at. And that satellite image has detected that, hey, there's a really hot area that's not normal. That's not what it's supposed to be. So this black dot is detecting a wildfire or something that's abnormal. And most times it is a wildfire. And on big fire days, we will use this like crazy. This is all we'll watch sometimes. We'll put on a big monitor and we will update it automatically to see if there's anything in it. So here's another way we can use meteorology. During gas leaks, so you might think to yourself, well, what does a gas leak have to do with meteorology? Well, not really much until you introduce variables into it, such as the Kestrel weather instrument, which I'm sure you guys have heard of. This is basically a weather meter that allows you to see atmospheric conditions live. And I'm talking 1 second data, which is why I love it. So this is extremely important because if we have a gas leak, and let's say we have buildings nearby, and those buildings might have their windows open, whatever. Somehow you can gain access into that building. And we have a gas leak that goes into that building. We need to know the direction of the wind and how fast that wind's going. Because if it's serious enough, those people could get carbon monoxide poisoning from that gas leak. So knowing the direction and the wind during those gas leaks can help us avoid people getting carbon monoxide poisoning and potentially passing away. Which is actually something we had a few weeks ago on January 24th. We had a gas leak at the solid waste plant as a result of somebody digging in an area they weren't supposed to be digging in. And we were monitoring that wind as it progressed throughout the day because we were right next to that facility, and that facility had very large open doors. So that's just 3 different ways that we can use meteorology when we're responding to incidents. And now this is the recovery part. So in 2021, Louisiana was impacted by Hurricane Ida. I'm not going to get too much into meteorology, but I have certain things listed out there. The main thing to know is that near the loop, I believe that's how you say that name. I hope that's how you say that name. We have 138 mile per hour wind gusts, which is near La Rose. I can't think of the name. I'm sorry. Which is near La Rose, Louisiana, which is where I did disaster relief at. This is important to know because thousands of people were displaced as a result of this disaster, and it affects us all. Weather does. So on September 15, 2021, I left my small little town of 500 people of Tipton, Oklahoma, and I went down to Louisiana to help with disaster relief. I worked 14 days straight with absolutely no breaks. That was more so my fault. I chose to work without breaks. And I worked 15-hour days. This was because I am committed to helping people when they're at their lowest in life. So you might be wondering, how does this fit in with meteorology? How does recovery fit in meteorology? Well, right here. So when I got to the shelter, it absolutely had nothing. I had to set the shelter up myself. This is 82 cots you're looking at, 6 by 10 area. And if you look right here, this is wind damage from Hurricane Ida. Each one of these areas are tiles that come or that are right above the second floor right here. Why does that matter? Well, since this damage was here and there was actual damage to the outside of the roof, anytime we got rain, there was a significant flooding event in this shelter. I'm not totally sure why they made this shelter a shelter after it had the significant damage, but they did. So as a result, we started getting heavy rain. This is heavy rain from Tropical Storm Nicholas. And it's coming right here. Obviously, the blue dot is me. And this is coming our way. I know it shows tracks going that way, but it's actually going this way. So this is heavy rain. We're talking maybe like an inch an hour. Like we're talking heavy rain. So what I did is when I saw this, I started coordinating with American Red Cross people and the National Guard to try to figure out a way that we could mitigate this threat right here from causing significant flooding and disrupting people who had already been displaced. So I started giving updates every 30 minutes on not just this, but this one as well, because this one actually was going a little bit that way. And every update I gave them, I started telling them, hey, this storm is this far out and it's producing this much rain. We need to start, working on a solution. And that solution, I don't have a photo of it here and I didn't discuss it on the text, but that solution was to get a big blue tarp that you usually put on roofs after a disaster has occurred to protect it from any other kind of debris or rain. And we basically put that over all of this affected area. And then we took a hose that redirected back outside and took all that water outside. So if you can tell, we were able to use meteorology in two different ways. I was able to see where that weather was at or where the thunderstorms are at and coordinate with the National Weather Service, or excuse me, National Guard, as well as American Red Cross officials. So we could get this up to mitigate that flooding threat, as well as the other way we used it is, well, thunderstorms are meteorology. So every time we had rain come down here, we would bring the water down using a vacuum and we'd go back outside. And it's not the best way to do things, but when you're at a shelter in the disaster zone, you gotta work. So the last part, this is Mr. Linton. His whole life was turned upside down by this hurricane. I'm talking his entire house was just completely destroyed. I worked with him to get him a new home before I left. And if there's one thing I can say to you guys more than anything, if you get one thing out of this presentation, it's to volunteer. Whether that is with disaster relief or that's doing something else in meteorology. Volunteering, there's nothing more gratifying than volunteering during a disaster and knowing that you're making an impact on these people's lives in a positive way when they are at their lowest. Like I said, Mr. Linton, he lost everything. He was there for about a month, and I'm just very thankful for him. I had such a positive impact on him that he called me on Christmas Day and thanked me for that work I did with him and FEMA and just talking about severe weather events that could affect him. But again, if there's one thing if you get out of this whole presentation, it's to volunteer. Not only will it give you that gratification that you are making a difference for people's life, but it will also help you potentially get a job. For Matt, he worked at Lamar County Emergency Management, and part of that experience as a volunteer helped him get a job, what was it, with South Climate Adaptation, which is, from what I understand, a newer group. Yeah, so a much more newer group. So again, that experience helped him get that job. So you just need to get out there and volunteer. And if you're interested in operational meteorology, which everyone here is interested in, I believe, working with an emergency management agency will give you that experience. It will look good on a resume because you are working with an emergency management agency during severe weather events, and you're getting that much needed experience that you may need to have in the real world. You're not putting out warnings, but you are still making a difference because you're helping with the tornado sirens, pushing information out, and so forth. Obviously, there are other options that you can go with, but that's just my view on it. So, and also one other thing with disaster relief, during the disaster relief with Hurricane Ida, you know, I was out there cooking meals. I was doing virtually everything, cooking meals, making small talk with people, checking on them to see if they needed anything. We had a power outage due to heavy rain that I guess there was a utility pole that was slightly damaged still, but it was still active. So somehow the rain got into the wires and it caused a huge power outage. You know, during that, I was providing operational support to our American Red Cross leaders in the shelter. So again, that's actually also another aspect that we can use meteorology during the recovery process. So, and then finally, here's my contact information. I know that went off the screen a little bit, but that's just me. That's what I do. And that's how emergency management and meteorology play together. I hope I didn't go too fast for anyone, but another thing I will say is I am very thankful that we have made these strong advancements in meteorology. Because as I said, with the mitigation part, it's because of that research that you guys will be doing in the future, potentially, or the operational side. It's because of that that we, on the emergency management side, are able to see our vulnerabilities in the community. We're able to mitigate those vulnerabilities. So I'm really thankful for what you guys do and what you guys will be doing in the future. But that's all for me.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm gonna take this thing off. That's okay. I was struggling to talk. Yes, sir.
So it seems like you already made it pretty clear to us what the most rewarding aspect of your job is, but I guess I wanted to ask a little bit more about some of the challenges. What would you say that one of the most challenging aspects of constantly dealing with the public on a regular basis would be?
From a meteorology standpoint, or just in general?
In general.
Well, it's that there's so much information out in the out in the public. You can find information anywhere on anything, whether it's information that is accurate or false. And usually it tends to be information that is false that our citizens, especially in Limerick County, get. So they'll come to us saying that, hey, this is for severe weather wise. They'll say, hey, this person's saying one thing about severe weather, but you're saying a different thing. And what I'll have to do is I'll have to talk to them about how my forecasting isn't just my own forecasting, but I'm also talking directly to the National Weather Service. So that's one way we do that. But when it comes to things such as like tornado warnings and sounding the sirens, a lot of the mentality everywhere you go is that they want to rely on tornado sirens. So trying to tell them that they need to rely on things such as like weather radios, WEAs, and so forth. It's kind of hard because most people are stuck in that mentality that they want to listen to the tornado siren.
Okay.
So I hope that answers your question. I know I went a little bit off topic, but
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. Has there ever been a specific time where you're dealing with a community official and they're not necessarily taking your advice or your suggestion to like as much as they maybe should, and they decide to go their own way based off of somebody else's advice, and that doesn't end up working for them, and ends up building rapport for you? Has there ever been an experience like that?
absolutely. I think Matt needs that. There absolutely has, and we actually had an incident like that back in February when we had a tornado warning. We had a tornado warning again, that one photo I showed was the tornado warning. It was coming out of Pushmataw County into Lamar County. And a fire to fire at Ash Creek. I'm not sure if it was Ash Creek, but it was some fire department in the county dispatched their own firefighters. So how it goes is we'll go to the dispatch first and we'll tell them if we need those firefighters. This is just how it works. It's not anything more than that. And basically this one fire department, they saw that tornado warning, so they dispatched everyone. And mind you, this is in the northwest side of the county where they're just getting light rain. And throughout the night, you know, they were working this event and they were just working in standard rain. We're talking like light, medium rain. So yes, we have had incidents like that. And what ended up happening with that is we weren't talking with that agency because they self-dispatched in an area that they shouldn't have been in. So that was kind of our idea because they were basically using resources up that they shouldn't have been using. That could have been used elsewhere if a more serious incident happened. Okay. So I'm sorry, that was kind of a long answer to your question, but
Oh, that was great. I like the rambling kind of, and just.
that's kind of
like-
what happens with me.
Yeah, it's like a conversation. I think that is how it should go.
That Matt will know. I'll just start rambling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had incidents like that, and it's frustrating, but you have to hold your composure and just realize that your idea is to mitigate loss of life, and that's really what you're doing. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one. So you mentioned that you were doing disaster relief in Louisiana. And a lot of people don't know that like you can actually volunteer to do that.
Absolutely.
What places could you go to or get in touch with to want to be a volunteer for a disaster relief?
Okay, so that's a really good question. You can go with the American Red Cross. Every part of Oklahoma has their own chapter. So the southwest side is actually involved with the Central Oklahoma agency. So there's Central Oklahoma and then there's Southwestern Oklahoma American Red Cross. Then we have Northwestern Oklahoma American Red Cross. I believe Northeast is on their own. And then in the Southeast, we have our own chapter. What you want to do is you'll just contact them, or you'll go on the website and you'll say that you're interested in volunteering. You'll fill out a form and then they'll get in contact with you. There is a wide variety of things you can do to just help your own small community or on the national scale like I did in Louisiana. And it's not all being at ground zero. You could do disaster relief in Louisiana like IT work and not even be at the disaster zone. You can, there's a wide variety. There's other NGOs such as Team Rubicon. They are basically the same as American Red Cross, they're just a different company. It's a little bit more hard to get into them from what I've experienced and from other people have told me. And then we have American Corps. Those guys are I've seen American Corps work during Louisiana, and those are some of the hardest working people I've ever seen. So if you want to work your butt off during disaster relief, go with them because they will put you to work. But those are just three off the top of my head. There are different BOADs and NGOs in your community that may also do a similar thing, but they're on a smaller scale. I know it's been a lot of talking, so I apologize.
I guess I have another one. So what's the first challenge that comes to mind as something that you dealt with and you felt like you learned the most from during your time in emergency management?
It's realizing that not everyone comes from the same background as you. So like, I may know all of this emergency management experience emergency management knowledge. I also may have knowledge in meteorology, but I have to realize that not everyone has that same knowledge. So what you have to do is you kind of have to go onto their level and talk to them on their level. And that's not a bad thing. That's just saying that, hey, they're not informed about it,
Okay, so in a way you feel like you kind of have to translate a lot of the information that you're being given to their level so that they would be able to understand it and respond to it accurately.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's one challenge I've really noticed. And another thing is you just have to have empathy with everyone. If you don't have empathy, you're not gonna be able to relate to people. And that's one thing that I very much found out when I got into emergency management, is that you need to have empathy and realize that people have been impacted by these disasters, and they're gonna act differently than they may normally do. So you have to realize that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Is that it?
I do have a question
Yes,
I was
sir.
curious about. So when you're like, if it's a severe weather day and you're trying to communicate to your community like about preparedness actions, have you found that a particular medium of communication has been more effective than others, or particular media in combination?
That's a really good question. Yes, I have actually. So we'll usually use social media during severe weather events to push that information out. That's one of the best ways that I've noticed, but we also have another way, and that's through hyperreach, which is very similar to WEAs, which are wireless emergency alerts, which is what the National Weather Service pushes out and all that. Not gonna get into that, but anyhow, it's similar to that. So we have found that pushing messages throughout that is also another good medium for them to be able to receive information and then act correctly. But we mainly use social media because that's what we find to be most useful.
And does that hyper reach, does that require like a specific app or radio or something like that?
Absolutely not. Just requires you to have cellular data. So
Interesting.
basically what happens is, I would go to it right now, but I don't really have an exact link to the Reimer County one. Basically what happens is that you'll have somebody go to the web page, they'll put in their email address or their phone number, and then they're automatically signed, or well, there's more to it. They can sign up for severe weather alerts. They can sign up for any other kind of alerts if they want. And then during like a tornado warning, that alert will get sent to their phone immediately.
Okay.
But another thing we can do is we can custom send messages. So last week we had a power outage as a result of a snapped pole. And I sent out a custom message to about 500 people that were signed up to it, just in that affected area. That's not the entire county. And I was seeing that message all over Facebook of people saying that they loved it. They were informed because of it. So that's another way.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that existed. That sounds really useful for more area focused alerts.
For more local. It's a great program, and there's other programs called Code Red that do similar things. The one disadvantage with HyperReach that I found is that they push their warnings out the second the National Weather Service issues any kind of warning or watch, which is great. However, during winter weather, National Weather Service updates those winter warnings at 3 a.m. and then another time in the morning, and then twice in the afternoon. What I have found is that at 3 a.m. we'll get a call from this automatic alert informing people that they're in a warning, but that warning hasn't changed. So it's the same message that they received hours ago, and they're waking up for nothing.
Yeah.
So right now I'm working with HyperReach to try to mitigate that so that we don't lose those end users and go back into what we're currently dealing with, which is people not really being informed. Because not everyone has social media. You have to have other ways of reaching them, which is by using HyperReach. So.
In the event of an emergency, how many people will usually be working in an EOC, and what are the most important roles in the center?
It really depends. Well, it depends on how many people will be working. So on most occasions, my director works a secondary job at a military base. So I may be the only one there. However, if he's in the area, I would request him to come in to kind of help with those operations. So most nights it's either one or two. However, we can bring in Matt if he was in the area. That would be three. We could bring in another volunteer. We could have 4 people, and we could distribute those roles out to like me doing weather radar, watching or monitoring radar, and I would have Matt monitoring radar with me, just so I could have a second person go off. And then we could use another person to fill out storm reports and then another person to take storm reports from storm spotters.
Okay.
So it really varies. It also varies on the seriousness of the severe weather event. So if it's small, I'll be the only one there. If it's larger, we'll have.
Okay, so it depends on the scale.
Exactly. Okay. It's kind of like the National Weather Service, you know, they'll have less people in if it's not a serious day, but if it's a serious event, they may have it fully staffed. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys letting me come here and talk my head off for what, an hour or so.
Yeah, thank you so
I
much.
hope
Thank you
you-
so
Super
much for your
interesting.
presentation.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I really hope you guys got something, at least one thing out of it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I'll go ahead and end the meeting so we can share that. I know.
I think you have to stop the share.
Yeah. I do not like Zoom. Let's see. There.